Guys, good morning and welcome to the sunrise safari. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie and you will have the pleasure of my company for the next 3 hours. And on camera with me I have Jeandre, and he's going to be keeping us entertained with hopefully some wonderful images of this morning's drive. And we've got Tara and Lou in FC keeping us together. It is a very, very nippy morning here on Djuma Game Reserve in the Sabi Sands. It is 9 degrees centigrade, which is 8 degrees Fahrenheit, so definitely feeling a bit of a nip in the air. So, just a little bit of an update for those of you who might have missed yesterday's sunset safari. Now, I'm not sure what Wendy and Jigger were talking about when they were parked before the drive yesterday afternoon, but they both decided that they'd had enough. I'm not sure if it was the combination of the cheetah sightings and then the wild dog sightings that we had yesterday, but Wendy decided not to move, and then Jigger decided not to move, and we had to do some very quick bush mechanics. So thanks to James's mechanical genius and thinking, we were able to get Wendy back into gear. And for those of you who are mechanically minded, basically the diff lock and the high range, low range selector sheared off somewhere tucked down in the bowels of Wendy, and we were able to tug it with a rope and get it back into gear. Unfortunately, that means no low range for Wendy, and we are on Wendy today. Jigger has sheared off bolts between the steering column and the steering bar, so the right wheel is a doogu and definitely out of commission for the morning. So we are working on it. We will try and get both cars up and running. But unfortunately, it looks as though Jig is going to need a little bit more TLC than Wendy, and is probably going to be out of commission until sometime tomorrow. So for now, we have 3 hours of us, and we're going to have a wonderful time driving around. I've just been to check the hyena den. Unfortunately, it looks as though they've moved, which is something we've suspected for the last 2 days. There's absolutely no tracks coming in or out, but there are tracks leading into the block on my right. So we're going to go and just check around, see if maybe we can get a good idea of what's happening there. And just for a quick update, I know that many of you will by now have heard about the very sad case of the Nkuhuma lioness who was killed by one of the Birminghams. Very, very sad story. And the Nkuhumas were seen drinking at Nkoro last night, and apparently then tried to push up back to that buffalo carcass and were chased away by the Birminghams. As far as we know, luckily no injuries last night. They all seem to be present and accounted for, but they are still across our boundary. So I know that many of you would have been concerned. It is a very sad, sad situation. Unfortunately, just one of those realities that happens out here in the wild, and one that I know is a devastating loss for the Nkuhumas. However, they are across our boundaries, and it's time to see what else is happening out here. So let us see if we can go and find some hyena activity. And I know that Brent and James are not going to be sitting idly by while we are out this morning. They're going to be out on tracking team, hopefully helping us to find something. And I'm sure at some point we will bump into them and they'll say hello to you all, just to get you some variety from my particular face and voice. I think all of the animals are tucked away still, trying to warm up. Guys, I'm getting updates from Karen and lots of other viewers on the chat rooms to say that they heard roaring on the Djuma Dam camera last night, so we'll definitely be following up on that. And also the reports of the Nkuhuma pride on the Nkoro camp at the Nkoro Dam coming to drink. So I'm sure that that is the pride that I heard reports of. It was definitely them. They were seen drinking there, and their numbers seem to be somewhat depleted. I believe there were 7, which would tie in with that death of the one lioness, but at least we know that the rest of the pride is intact for now. And although it's very, very difficult to predict, it's very difficult to predict exactly what is going to happen over the next few weeks. I must say I was fairly surprised by the actions of the Birmingham boys. I thought they were a little bit young, but they obviously took their chance while the Matimba males were away. And essentially what seems like what happened yesterday, or last 2 nights ago at some point, the Nkuhumas killed a buffalo and they were feeding on it, and the Birminghams came to steal it, and unfortunately one lioness did not make it out in time, and one of the males killed her and then fed on her a little bit, which is not unheard of. It's fairly unusual for them to commit cannibalism, but it is not unheard of. So he did feed on her a bit, and then the body was found yesterday morning by Taxon, I believe. So a very, very sad situation. It is one of those things that just does happen. The Birminghams are obviously trying to assert their authority, and it's impossible to predict, but I think the next few weeks are going to be particularly hard on Junior. He is going to have to make himself scarce if the Birminghams are moving into that area. It will be time to go for young Junior. So you would have heard me talking about the Matimba males, and they are the 2 dominant males in this area. They come from a slightly larger coalition, I believe, but they are the 2 that are regularly seen. And Mavis from Florida, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Now Mavis has been doing some research into the family trees of the various prides in this area, and she would like to know a little bit more about the Matimba's background. And I think that's fantastic work that you've been doing, Mavis, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. Unfortunately, I've only been working here for about a month, so I'm still getting a handle on where these lions come from. Now, the fact that they are called the Matimba males to me implies that they are from the Matimba pride. However, where they've come from, I'm not sure if they pushed up from the south or the north of our area. But they are 2 lions that are sort of 8 to 9 years of age. The other one, I think, is a little bit older, maybe around 10. And I'm sure many of the viewers have a little bit more information on that, and I'm sure Mavis would love to hear it, and I certainly would. So guys, if you have any info, you can send it through to #SafariLive on Twitter, or to questions@wildearth.tv. And if you are joining us for the first time, we have some amazing stories of some really incredible animals, and it's so cool that we get to follow them from birth and follow their stories and their various pride dynamics and the leopard dynamics. It's really, really interesting. But this is a live safari, so what you are seeing is what is happening right now on the Sabi Sands, Djuma Game Reserve at the moment. And if you have any questions, it doesn't matter what the subject is, you are more than welcome to send them through to us on #SafariLive on Twitter, and to questions@wildearth.tv. And I am very, very keen to hear from you. I'm getting some updates on the Matimba Pride, or the Matimba Coalition, and apparently they were first spotted in Manuleti side, which is north and east of us, and they were spotted there in 2011, a coalition of 6 large males, and 2 of them sort of hang around the Sabi Sands region. That is, they're occasionally joined by a 3rd member, and then obviously we have the 2 that we see regularly, which is Hairy Belly and the Ginger Matimba male. And those 2 animals in particular are starting to reach the end of their pride. I know that the ginger male has quite an injury to his paw. There's a bit of contention about how he got it, whether it was a snake bite or whether he's got something stuck in it and he's just repeatedly keeping it open by licking it. But they are starting to be challenged by the Birmingham boys. And unfortunately, pride takeovers don't happen necessarily with one big fight. There's a build-up of weeks and weeks worth of sort of challenging, and the various lions getting to know each other's strengths and deciding whether or not they want to risk a big conflict. So we're going to be seeing a lot of interesting happenings. And of course, there's no guarantees that the Birminghams will decide to take over this area. They could move back north into Manuleti. They could push further south. It's impossible to predict at this point. Although it does look as though over the past few weeks they are spending more and more time around Djuma and then around Torchwood as well. So all areas that the Nkuhuma Pride have been seen in regularly. And for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, the Matimba male lions also associate with the Styx Pride, which is a pride that's sort of split into a couple of different groups, and they're generally seen to the south or in Arethusa, so the south or to the west of us. And one female has some very, very young cubs at the moment, so she's going to have to make sure to keep them far, far out of the reach of those males. And we do have quite an extraordinary view here on this chilly, chilly morning. Really, really beautiful way to start the morning. Just the mist in all of those low-lying areas. So a really beautiful, quiet morning. A lot of the birds seem to still be asleep, but we could hear that crested barbet trilling away in the background. I heard a white-browed scrub robin, which is one of my favorite little whistling calls. I can hear some drongos chirping away, as well as the sort of distant call of the grey go-away birds. I'm also seeing lots and lots of hyena tracks on the road in front of me. And we are very close to an old den site, so hopefully we can find some action there. So a truly beautiful morning, and we're going to start to see the change of season coming in fairly soon. At the moment it's typical August weather. It's very, very dry, At the moment it's nice and still, but generally each day is a bit blustery, a bit blowy, a bit windy. And it's exciting to know that the seasons are changing, the days are getting longer, and hopefully this will spell the end of a very, very dry season for the animals. We've still got another 2 or 3 months of it until the big rains come, but I'm hoping that the rains this year will be a little bit more enthusiastic than they were last year. Now, I just want to poke my nose into this den site and just see what's happening there. As I said, I've got a fair amount of tracks on the road in front of me. And they do look like they were sort of here from last night. So let's see if we can sneak in here and just have a look. Now, unfortunately, it took James and Brent's combined strength to get Wendy into high range gear. So low range, I think, might be out of the question. We needed to use a series of ropes and interesting clutch control to try and just jolt it back into place. I don't want to risk now displacing it. So we shall be in high range for the duration of this drive. So we've been talking a little bit, obviously, about the death of this Nkuhuma Pride female, and Marianne from Boston has got a very good question for us. She would like to know that if the Birmingham boys' intention is to dominate the Pride and to sort of start reproducing, why would they have killed that female and not tried to mate with her? And it was probably something that happened where they got a little bit overly defensive of that buffalo carcass. The Nkuhumas probably fought very, very hard to try and defend their kill, and the Birmingham males lost their temper a little bit with her. It's not an uncommon situation. It could also have been that she was pregnant, or that they knew that their options were limited in terms of being able to overthrow the Matimba males just yet. So it's a possibility that that was the reason. It's hard to tell. It's not unheard of for males to kill females like this. I think that the fighting instinct kicks in fairly strongly and sometimes results in the death of the females. And she was probably working very hard. We might even have found that they were out to kill the 2 young sub-adults. Unfortunately, there is no action here at this den site. Very, very quiet. Now, I'm sure that these hyenas are in here somewhere, but I think that looking for them might be a job for another day, because I think we're going to have to go and walk through this block and try and find them. And just to give you an idea of what it is we're looking for, I'll stop the car for now. So with active den sites, you start to look for lots of hyena tracks up and down, and you also start to smell it. Now, these tunnels in this den site haven't been excavated in a while. They've started to collapse in. There's no flies around the entrance, so I think that they have probably not moved to this den. They must have moved somewhere further off into this block, where we've been seeing them running up and down fairly regularly. So I just wanted to give you an update on the den site while we are here. But just to finish off that question, which I think is a very valid one, as to why that lioness might have died, it is guesswork on our part. We don't know, but it could be that the Birmingham boys were actually aiming to kill those 2 young sub-adult females to bring the females back into estrus, to bring their mother back into estrus. And they are just right at the cusp of the age where they might be left alone, but it could be that that female was trying to defend them or trying to defend Junior and just got in the way. So it's just one possibility, it's one theory, but we don't know for sure. It is something that is recorded in lions' behavior, and it's one thing that we can't fully explain. So, very sad day for her. Unfortunately, we don't know which individual lioness it was. So you'll notice that in keeping with the other hyena den, this is made into a termite mound, or made out of a termite mound, an old abandoned one that the aardvarks have started, and then the hyenas continue to excavate. And Carol from New York, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Carol would like to know if spotted hyenas always utilize termite mounds as their den. And the answer is generally yes. In all of the times I've seen hyena dens, they have been in termite mounds. I imagine in areas where there might not be as many termite mounds, there's a possibility that they could utilize rock crevices. But it is interesting because they tend to dominate in terms of termite mound usage. But the brown hyena, which is a member of the same family, slightly smaller, different social structure, they will tend to favor rocky crevices. They climb up into what is known colloquially as koppies, which are sort of little mounds with rocks on them, and they find caves and holes in there, and they den in there. I have seen brown hyena denning in termite mounds, but it's not the norm. So interesting difference between the two species. It makes sense because you want to reduce the competition as much as you can between the two of them. And finding a brown hyena den, let me tell you, is one of the most exciting things, because brown hyenas tend to be a lot quieter, a lot shyer, and a little bit more retiring than the spotted hyenas, and you don't often get to see them. So I know that when we found one, we actually put up a camera trap at an active den site that we thought was a spotted hyena den, and when we went back and got the pictures, we had these tiny little brown balls of fluff that turned out to be brown hyena cubs, and it was incredibly exciting. Now, I'm not sure how many times the viewers on WildEarth have seen a brown hyena. I believe it's happened at least once, but that is something that would be very, very exciting to see. And there's lots of tracks here, so I'm sure that they're in the area. It's just a question of whereabouts they have gone, because their tracks are all over the place. Lots of little ones too. So they are here somewhere. A couple of years ago, there was a bit of a fuss in Johannesburg about a brown hyena that was seen walking the streets, and people were amazed that this wild animal was coming through, until a group of researchers actually sort of spoke up and said, listen, we've been monitoring them for years and years, this particular family. They den under the Gululi's interchange, or they used to den under the Gululi's interchange in Johannesburg, which is one of the biggest highway or free state or interstate sort of connections between Johannesburg, the airport, and Pretoria. And they'd been denning there. The researchers had been watching them for a very long time. So amazing how adaptable the various animals can be. That is fairly unusual, but it does make you wonder how many other animals are wandering through cities. And I know that in Palabora, where there is a gate entrance to the Kruger, so it borders right on the Kruger, there's often photographs of lions walking down the road past petrol stations, elephants coming out. It does happen. Sure, I'm sure these hyena are here somewhere. Their tracks are everywhere. And I heard them calling outside on quarantine clearings last night. So they're definitely around. just been chatting a little bit about hyenas and their dynamics and their den sites that do carry a very pungent odor. And Anne, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Anne would like to know if hyenas, spotted hyenas, social groom, and if they are as fastidious as leopards and lions about cleanliness. And the answer to that is that they do lick each other occasionally. It's part of their bonding ritual, but it's not really I wouldn't describe it as a grooming session per se, but they will lick each other just as a sort of sign of affection, especially between mothers and cubs, obviously, but also between the lower ranking members of the group. They might groom one of the higher ranking ones, but it's more just a greeting than anything else. They don't actually sit and groom in the same way that lions do. And I wouldn't say that they are particularly fastidious about their cleaning habits. They do tend to be rather dirty. We've seen recently with all of the activity at the den, a lot of the females coming back with very bloody faces, bloody fronts, and very muddy. So they're not quite as fastidious. Just making sure that I listen very carefully to the Game Drive channel. Most of the other guides are off towards Torchwood to see what they can follow up with those lions there. But that's good news for us, because then we can have some updates. We're there, thank you. Well spotted, Gendre, quite literally. Oh, and they're coming to us too. I will move in a little bit closer. I just want to get an idea of the dynamics and just to show you what it is we are looking at. So we knew they were here somewhere. So now we need to make a fairly careful, considered approach to this little family of hyena. And these are our regular clan members that we often see around the den site. I knew they were in this block, so that is great news. So we've got, by the looks of it, we've got the 3 older cubs. The one is slightly older, and then the twins, so 7 months and 5 months, give or take, and 1 adult female. So I would like to be able to approach, but I'd like to do so fairly carefully, given Wendy's lack of low-range gear. So I don't want to scare them off. I think I see my best approach. But very, very cool. So we have found the hyenas. Whether or not their den site is here is highly likely. I think it's probably just off in that drainage line somewhere. But these guys are out and about. So let's see if we can get a little bit closer and see what they are up to this morning. Awesome spot by Gendre. Thank you very much. It's good to see a successful conclusion to our hyena tracking mission. So for the moment, the cubs have just dashed off to the right of us, but they will be back. They've just gone to explore a little bit. They'll be back soon. And this female looks to be... Which female is this? I think that this is the mother of the twins. who are now on their way back. Obviously, it's a little bit difficult with spotted hyenas, but we are starting to get to know the three main females and their cubs fairly well. And I think this is the mother of the middle set of cubs. The mother of the oldest cub is a little bit younger than her. And then obviously the mother of the youngest cub, who is too young to be out and about, is the one that we suspect is the matriarch of the clan with a big scar on her back. And she's seen something off in the distance. Not sure what she's looking at. So we've got a question from Lisa, who would like to know if maybe these spotted hyenas moved because they picked up on all of the tension from the lions in the area and they moved on. And I don't think so. I think that they moved because their den site was starting to get rather smelly and they were acquiring lots and lots of parasites, as you can imagine, with several individuals living in one den, bringing back carcasses, and being slightly less, as we discussed earlier, slightly less fastidious about their cleaning habits. And whatever it is she's seen, she's not terribly fazed by. She's just looking off into the distance. And here come the little cubs, making their way back. We've decided that it was a little bit far to go without Mom's help and support. Hello, little one. Are you coming to say hello? And they are terribly, terribly cute. And they do have mischief all over their faces. It's one of my favorite things to watch, little hyena cubs. So they've just moved behind us and they decided that a approach from the rear side of the car might be a good idea. So I just want to keep an eye on what they're doing. The one is coming to sniff the back. And the problem is, if you're joining us for the first time, the problem with hyena cubs, I'm just going to let the brake off so that they get a fright a little bit. The problem with little hyena cubs is that they tend to be very, very cheeky in the way that they approach vehicles, and they love to explore their new world. And they usually do so with their teeth, which, now listen, little hyena cub, Wendy's struggling enough as it is. We don't need you to contribute to that. I'm just waiting for the sort of telltale nibbling sounds. But maybe they're starting to outgrow that particular thing. Hello. What you doing? Let me just have a look at whatever this one is up to. Yeah? You naughty. You coming to chew the tire, hey? Phew. Cheeky little ones. You're so brave now. You're so brave. So I'm going to try and have eyes in the back of my head at the same time, because there are some cheeky little monsters circling us, and definitely with that expression on their face like they are either have done something wrong or they are about to. I'm just going to crane my head over the side here just to see that they're not stealing the cap off the edge of my wheel. Little monsters. So hyena cubs are definitely one of my favorite animals to watch. As many of the regulars might know, spotted hyenas are my favorite predator, my favorite carnivore. They are highly, highly entertaining, and they are so curious and so intelligent, and their dynamics can be so interesting. So while we're looking at them, and we know that they probably have a den somewhere in this area, Raisa would like to know if I've ever found any hyena dens at Arethusa, or if we know of any in that area. Now, I'm sure there must be. They almost are certainly denning in that area, but we haven't heard any reports of it yet. And if they are, it will be a different clan to the one that we have here. Listen, monster. And I'm staring straight into this little one's eyes at the moment. Hey! And he's chewing my tire. He or she. Oh, you cheeky. You are so cheeky. And again, hey! No. Naughty, naughty little monsters. And that's one of my favorite things about them, is they are so cheeky and they are so curious. Unfortunately, I do have to shout at them every now and again, but you can see how quickly they recognize tone. So when I'm talking normally like this, there's no response, but the minute I start to say, hey, change the tone a little bit, lean out, you can see immediately there's a reaction from them. And this little one's decided that since it can't chew my tire, it's going to chew that poor defenseless twig. So I'm sure that there are den sites in Arethusa. Sorry, Raisa, to continue your question. We haven't heard any reports yet, but it is a very, very nice area for hyenas. So I'm sure that they're around there. You can just see the little one nibbling his paw. Oh, I'm so tired now. Hello, monster. And sitting here just to be able to describe this little one to you, they look incredibly fluffy and cuddly. Oh, and look at your eye contact. Oh, you're so brave. You are so brave. And they look incredibly fluffy and cuddly. I do know from experience that that fur isn't quite as soft as it looks. But they already got their enormous feet going. And they're very, very cute and also slightly smelly. I'm getting a little bit of a whiff of sort of wet dog combined with a bit of rotting meat. So cuddly looking, but maybe not terribly cuddly. And there you can see it was definitely the twins' mom. We were right about that, because she's currently suckling one of the younger ones. Now, if we were to be walking on foot through this area, they would definitely not be nearly as relaxed. You can see they are perfectly comfortable with the company of the car, but Bugsy wanted to know how hyenas would react to us walking, and the answer is that generally they tend to run away as fast as possible in the opposite direction, just to get away from us. I have met one or two hyenas that are fairly relaxed on foot, and I've also heard stories of hyenas following walking groups, just more out of curiosity than any kind of threat. And a hyena poses no serious threat to human life unless they are very sick or injured or trapped. But they are not known for attacking people who are walking around. Generally, the accidents that you hear with hyenas is from people who are sleeping and they haven't put up an adequate watch system or a way of keeping the hyenas away from them. And hyenas tend to explore with their mouths. So you do hear stories of people getting bitten while they are sleeping out in the bush. And then if hyenas are hand-fed or fed around camps, they become slightly more of a danger. But typically wild hyenas like this, Bugsy, if we went walking, if I got out of the car now, or if I looped around and then approached on foot, they would be up and running, especially these three little cubs. And a very peaceful, contented scene. So sleepy. just blinking a little bit to keep out the morning light. So we've definitely made some progress here. I'm almost certain that the den site is not far from our position at the moment, and I'm sure that the youngest cub is there. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to mark this position on my phone. I do know roughly where we are, but I'm going to mark it on my phone because I think over the next few days a little walk around to the various termite mounds around us would be a very, very good idea. I count at least 3 or 4 possible sites, so excuse me for 1 second, I'm just going to mark this and we will remember it and hopefully be closer to finding out where we are, where the hyena den is. Very, very close to this hyena den. Okay, so we've got the GPS coordinates and we'll be keeping an eye out for them. So I've said a lot about the termite mounds and how they excavate, spotted hyenas excavate in that area, and then we chatted a little bit about the brown hyena den sites, which is something that I would be incredibly keen to find. I don't think we've got the right sort of topography for that kind of thing, but you never know. As I said, I've seen them use termite mounds before. And Peggy tells me, in answer to my question earlier when we were talking about brown hyenas, that she only remembers one being seen on Djuma many years ago. So obviously something that is quite rare, and that is to be expected. We've got quite a high concentration of spotted hyenas and quite a high leopard and lion population. So it could be just that the brown hyenas, this isn't the ideal environment for them, and they're a little bit more scarce here. And typically they tend to flourish more towards the more arid regions, so into the Kalahari and Namibia, around those kind of areas. It's not as common to see them in the low-veld bushveld. So cute. And they do have such an unfair reputation that they've garnered through various media and movies as being terrible scavengers who are dirty and thieves. But you can see, how can you not like that little face? And so beautifully adapted for the way that they operate. That nose can pick up on the smell of a carcass from a good couple of kilometers away. Sometimes it is nice to just sit and listen and enjoy the peacefulness of this scene. Over the next few months, these 3 little cubs, who are not so little anymore, as we've started to notice over the last few days and the last few weeks, they've started utilizing that den site less and less. And they are going to get to the stage over the next few months where they don't really go back into those tunnels at all. They're now big enough and fairly fast that they can escape from most threats. They do need to be careful though, they don't want to get too brave too quickly. But their mothers are going to start pushing them, bringing them out more often away from the den towards the carcasses. And then if they are females, of course it is very hard to tell. We're still trying to get a handle on that particular dynamic. But we've got 3 of them here, so I'm not sure how many males and females we have. We must have a look at some point. see if we can figure it out. At the moment, there's not enough interaction for us to be able to work it out. I suspect that the older one is a male, the 7-month-old one, but that's more a gut instinct than anything else. We'll have to wait and see. And the reason I think that is because I've actually seen him being bullied fairly extensively by some of the older females, yet his mother seems to be quite high-ranking in the group, just judging by her behavior. She's the hyena with the hole in her ear. And yet her cub is fairly bullied by some of the other members. So I think it's a possibility that it's a male. I've seen him picked up, one by the tail and one by the neck, and sort of pulled between two of them, despite his protesting yelps. So that's my theory, that he's a male. And if he is a male, then he will be off in the next year or so to go and search for different clans and different mating opportunities. The rest of them, if they are females, they will stay with their natal clan. So they'll stay around here. And I don't even think that that little cub is suckling at the moment. It's just sleeping up against mom. So I'm just quietly listening to the Game Drive channel. I just want to hear what their updates are on those lions. Okay, stop talking about the lions for now. I'll keep my ears out though for any information, and I will promise to keep you all updated. And these guys seem very contented and sort of half asleep. And Diggy would like to know if any of the wild animals ever snore when they're asleep. And the answer to that is yes. I have definitely heard lions snuffling. They don't snore exactly like some humans have a chronic case of, but they do snuffle and they do snort in their sleep. I have heard them do it, much in the same way your pet dog might, whilst it's lying, sleeping contentedly away. I'm trying to think which other animals I've seen snoring. I've definitely seen lions snore. I don't think I've heard any other animals snoring, but I'm sure that these hyenas would. And just in the distance I can hear a pearl-spotted owlet calling, one of my favorite little owls. My lips are too dry to actually do a proper owlet call. It's August. It's a bit of a struggle. But they are wonderfully crepuscular little birds, so it's very common to hear them early in the morning and then late in the evening, just as it starts to get dark. And one of my favorite little owls, tiny, tiny little things that always look incredibly grumpy. And if on a day when my lips are not quite so chapped and I'm capable of producing a whistle that actually sounds like a whistle, you can call them over, and if you whistle nice and carefully and softly, they'll actually fly across to you just to have a look at if there's a rival bird around. So I mentioned earlier that this little one here I think might be a male, and Sharon from Pittsburgh would like to know how you tell the difference. She asks, isn't it very difficult because the equipment does look very similar? And Sharon, the answer is yes, especially when they are young at this age. So for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, we have to have a little bit of a physical description of the way the spotted hyenas work, because they are very, very unusual. The females are much, much larger. They have higher levels of testosterone than the males do, and that has actually led to an extending of the clitoris to produce a sort of pseudo-penis that looks very, very similar to the male penis. And it's actually a fused tract between the urinary tract and the vagina, which is highly unusual. I don't know of any other mammals in which that happens. Obviously with birds it is the standard norm, but as far as I know there aren't any other mammals who share that trait. I could be wrong, but it is very, very unusual. And what that means is that it can be very difficult to judge a hyena's sex, especially when they are young. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the book with me with the pictures in it. I do have a very good illustrative book that sort of shows that the end of the penis of the males is slightly different to that of the females. But when they are young, that difference isn't very clear at all. The end of the males is slightly more bulbous. With some of the older females, they have to give birth through that pseudo-penis. So it does tend to split open at the tip, and it makes it a little bit easier to see. And then you have to also look at the nipples. Unfortunately, the nipples are back towards between the back legs, so they can be confused with testicles, but the males have tiny, tiny testicles, and particularly adult mature females will have slightly larger nipples. And when they are suckling, then they become a lot clearer. But those are for mature adults. For these little ones, it becomes a little bit more tricky. The differences aren't clear unless they are very kindly being considerate and showing us exactly what they've got going on between their legs. But the best, probably in my experience, the best way of trying to sex hyena cubs is to watch their behavior and the way that they interact with each other and the way that they interact with other hyena. And that can be quite a complicated, you've got to spend a lot of time sitting and observing and starting to draw your own conclusions. And obviously you're not going to be accurate all of the time, but it can give you quite a good idea. At the moment, I have absolutely no clue whether the twins are male or female. Typically, if they were both female, there would be a lot more conflict between the two of them, because then they start to fight for dominance. Whereas if there's one male and one female, then the male just automatically assumes the subservient role. So I've been asked a question that I don't know the answer to, and I should know the answer to. And the question comes from James, who would like to know where the word hyena comes from and what it means. Now, James, I don't know the answer to that, and I should. I'm actually very curious now that you've asked it, and that is one of my favorite things about the questions that the viewers send through, is that it actually lets me think about stuff that I haven't necessarily considered. And I don't know the answer to James's question, but I'm sure that some of you out there might. So if you do know where the word hyena comes from and what it means, please feel free to send it through on #SafariLive on Twitter or to questions@wildearth.tv. Just trying to rack my brains and think about it, because I'm sure I used to know once upon a time. It's just one of those pieces of knowledge that is escaping me at the moment. Bear with me a moment, I just want to listen to what's happening on the radio. Okay, so they're just talking about the fact some of the guides are heading back across to Second Rock where that buffalo kill was, just to have a look at what's happening there. They haven't seemed to have located the lions yet. We were talking a little bit about the difference between brown hyenas and spotted hyenas and where they den. And Ginny from Virginia, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Ginny would like to know if you can tell the difference between brown hyena or spotted hyena tracks. And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. However, I need you to keep watching and bear with me, because I'd actually like to find a good example of a spotted hyena track for you, and then use it to demonstrate the difference between brown hyena and spotted hyena, which I can't do at the moment. Oh, Mom's got an itch. I can't do that at the moment because obviously we've got all of these little guys around us. But bear with me, Ginny, and when I get back out onto the road and I find a nice hyena track and a bit of a scratch. And that little cub obviously had a spot there that Mom was getting that was causing a leg twitch, like lots of dogs do when you scratch. Oh, this little one doesn't want to bath, doing a little bit of complaining. Where are you off to, Mummy? She's looking fairly full. They've obviously had a meal fairly recently. Direction she goes off in, because it looks as though these little cubs are going to hop up and follow her as well. Here we go. I'm just heading off after Mum. Nice contented family scene. I'm just letting them get a little bit further away before I start my car, especially because I don't have the low range option, so I can't keep my revs low. But now, are you going to show us where that den site is? So as we follow on and see if these guys lead us to the den, I do have a great update from Sally about the origins of the word hyena. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as I drive, but thank you very much for that, Sally. I do appreciate it. And it's always fascinating to hear where the various names come from. And often the stories can be fairly funny. So Sally tells me that the word hyena has a Middle English word that probably stems via Latin from the Greek. I'm not sure how you'd pronounce it, but hyena. And it is a sort of feminine version of the word for pig. Probably because the hyena's mane resembles the bristles of a wild boar. So very, very interesting. Not what I was expecting at all. So thank you for that, Sally. Absolutely fascinating. Interesting lesson in the history of the name hyena. Now, unfortunately, this is what I thought was going to happen. These little hyenas have moved off into this drainage line. Now, given Wendy's current slightly fragile state, I don't think I'm going to be rushing in after them. But it is a good start for us because we can start to learn about where they are denning. So they've gone into this thick block. It is, unfortunately for Wendy's current state of being, you can hear her protesting already. It is not going to be our best plan of action, especially without Jigger. So, Ginny, if you are still watching, what's happened there? Yes. They are still moving off into that block far away. Sorry, Jeandre. There you can, they are just disappearing off into that thick stuff, and you can see how very thick it is. So I'm not going to be putting Wendy through that today, because then we could be stuck without any sunset safari this afternoon. So Ginny, I promised you a lesson on hyena tracks, and I do just want to see if I can find a nice fresh example for you, and then I can demonstrate the difference between spotted and brown hyena tracks. Let's see what we can find on this road. They've crossed here, but the light wasn't fantastic. So quite an exciting morning. We did manage to fairly successfully track these hyena. It was a lot of luck involved more than anything else, but Lynn, thank you for your comment that we managed to find them, and Lynn suggests that I could find a needle in the proverbial haystack. There was a bit of luck involved, and there was definitely some good spotting from Jeandre. But the nice thing about living and working out here is that you get to make lots of observations, and you can build up evidence and stories in your head for days at a time and start to get an idea. So the fact that I had lots of fresh hyena tracks was one thing, but I've also noticed them pushing more and more into this direction from over the last week or so. So it's a bit of guesswork, a bit of supposition, and then also just a lot of time spent observing and moving through the bush, which helps a great deal. What is over there? Isn't it a little steenbokkie? Might be a bit tricky to see. That looks like a duiker. There we go, we've got a little duiker tucked away off to my left. So while we have a look at this little duiker, I just want to get hold of our tracking team and find out what's happening on that side of things. Brent for Jamie. Copy that, thanks Brent. Yeah, we had some nice missy here on Rebecca's Road where we think that they are still denning in this area. I think that they've left their old den site. Maybe if you can check on Gowrie Main and Triple M, see if there's any leopard and Konzo there. Thank you. Okay, so the tracking team is out and about. They have checked most of the eastern side of the property, and unfortunately they have found, in Brent's words, absolutely nothing. So it seems as though Juma is fairly quiet, and we shall head off to see what else we can find. Maybe we'll start heading a bit towards the north, see if we can pick up on any of those wild dogs that we saw yesterday, although I highly, highly doubt it. I think they will have left by now. I'm looking for some really nice clear tracks, but this light isn't going to do us the best of favors. Let's get onto the top of this road and then I will show you some tracks. So we were looking at that little dacre earlier, and they've got that amazing tuft of hair like a mohawk between their ears and the middle of their head. And I'm not sure of the exact reason behind that, but it is something that I've only recently noticed about them. For some reason I've never looked closely at the top of their head, but it is very, very sweet to see. I'm not sure if it's meant to imitate horns to make them seem a little bit more threatening, I'm not sure. Maybe in the same way that baby warthogs have those tufts of bristles coming out of the side of their face to sort of look like they've started growing tusks when they haven't. So let's go and examine some of the other drainage lines in the area. I'm trying to, it's amazing how instinctive it is, but I'm trying to drive Wendy really, really gently. Make sure that she stays in gear. Okay, well, since I haven't found a decent, nice, clear hyena track, I think I will just answer Ginny's question now. And I'll need my hands to demonstrate, so I'm going to stop for a moment. So Ginny, with spotted and brown hyena, now brown hyena typically have even more of a pronounced slope to their back, and that is partly because they are even more nomadic and move even greater distances than the spotted hyena. So they've got a very, very sloped and very clear difference between their powerful front end and a rather small back end. So when you're looking at hyena tracks, you will always see a size difference between the front and the back with both spotted and with brown, but with brown hyena, their back track is incredibly small. It looks like there's a cub walking next to it, but you know that it's still the same animal. So if a spotted hyena has a front foot like this and then a back foot like this, a brown hyena will have a similar sized front foot, and then their back foot will actually be almost like this. So there's a very, very pronounced difference. And if you are in a nice substrate like the soft sand that we find here on the roads, or in some really, really runny mud, the other thing that you also see is if you look really, really closely at the track, you'll start to see little points of hair around the track, and that's because the brown hyenas have got that shaggy, shaggy fur. So I was hoping to find a track to explain it, but you sort of get the idea. That is how you tell the difference. And you'll also start to look in terms of, especially if you see lots of tracks together, it's probably not brown hyena, it's probably spotted hyena. So those are the main distinct differences. Chatting a lot about hyenas and telling the difference between male and female, and Jeffrey from Austin tells me that in according to old law, a sort of understanding of the way that hyenas work, people actually thought that they change sex every season, which of course would be down to the fact that nobody could really understand their anatomy, and it's so unusual in the animal kingdom. You can imagine how it would have confused people. I know that there were certain beliefs that hyenas were hermaphrodites. They're not. They are distinctly different. It's just a very interesting approach that evolution has adopted in terms of their development. And it's one of those fascinating things that, although there's a couple of theories as to why they are like that, nobody fully can explain it. All that we know is that the result of that is that the hyenas' milk that they produce, because they are so big and strong and the females are so dominant, they get the access to the best parts of the kill, the best food, and are more than capable of kicking a male off a kill. So the consequence is that their milk is probably the richest of all of the mammal milk out here, the most protein rich and the healthiest for their babies. So that is one consequence. It is not an explanation, but still amazing to think that we don't know everything about these amazing animals. Josh, moving from one bristly animal to another. Josh, who is very much wide awake and a bit of an insomniac, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. I do hope we can keep you entertained in your sleepless state. And Josh would like to, he was talking a little bit about how in America there is a problem with wild boar, wild hogs becoming a problem animal, just increasing in number and compromising the natural habitat that they are in. And he would like to know if we have any similar problems in Africa. Josh, to the best of my knowledge, not something similar within South Africa. Our biggest problem, apart from obviously human encroachment and habitat loss and poaching, is in terms of animal interference, is probably domestic cats, which tend to, if they do enter an area like this, they tend to breed and hybridize with the African wildcat and start to sort of cause extinction of that natural species. So definitely not something that is popular around here. And if cats, as far as I know, nobody is allowed to have pet cats in this area. And if they do, if any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? The feral ones. Feral, that's the word I'm looking for. If any feral ones do enter the reserve, they will be removed as quickly as possible, just because they are such an incredible threat to an already endangered species. And I have yet to see an African wildcat here. I don't know if any of the viewers have, but it was something that would get me very, very excited if we did see one. I love them. I think they're beautiful animals, and the ancestor of our modern day domestic cats. Now somewhere on Juma there must be a leopard. There must be. Law of averages. There's got to be one wandering around here somewhere. It sounds as though all of our lions are off to the south and to the east of us. You never know what else you may find. I'm just going nice and slowly here past the drainage line. while we're looking for the leopards tucked away in the drainage line somewhere, which I'm sure there is at least one somewhere hidden away here, Rena would like to know if the increased lion activity might mean that we're going to see less leopards. Are they going to go into hiding or try and disappear away from here? And Rena, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to have too much of an effect on the leopards. The lions are distracted by their own dynamics, so they are no more or less of a threat to the leopards than they would always have been. Another little Dacre tucked in there. Excuse me, little Dacre, have you seen any leopards? Oh, there's two, but they've run off into the bush there. But no, in answer to your question, Rena, my opinion is that lions are dangerous to leopards regardless of what is happening in the lion world. So the changes in dynamics might even mean that the leopards feel a bit more secure because they know that the lions are distracted by their goings on with each other. So I don't think we're going to see any noticeable difference. That's just my personal opinion. And it is a very delicate balance between the predators. If you've got too many lions, you immediately start to compromise the other smaller predators. So the hyenas, the cheetah, the leopards, they immediately start to struggle if you've got an overpopulation of lions. And unfortunately, that is one of the things that the lions are able to keep their own numbers down, as we've seen a very good example of just yesterday. So one of those natural things, very, very sad, but one less lion might mean an increased chance of a leopard cub surviving. So it all ties in together. Heading across to Treehouse Dam. At least I think I am. I'm trying to get to Treehouse Dam. I sort of took a turn a little bit earlier and I wasn't entirely sure where I was, but I'm fairly certain this is where I want to be. And if it's not, it doesn't really matter too much. The dams are really starting to dry out. Sorry guys, a bit of a signal dip. I do just want to get on radio. I've heard something happening. Oh, got to Twin Dams by mistake. Sorry guys, a little bit of a black screen as I went through that dip there. I just want to hop onto the Game Drive radio and get hold of Craig, who has an interesting report. I just want to find out where that particular animal is. And I didn't make it to Treehouse Dam, I made it to Twin Dams, which is not quite where I expected to be, but we'll go with it. Not entirely sure how I did that. I'm usually quite okay on Juba's roads. Obviously too busy yakking away to pay attention to where I was. Standing by. Sorry, your message wasn't very clear. Can you just repeat? Copy that. Just repeat one more time. What was the position of that in law? Copy that, thank you. Craig for Jamie. Sorry guys. Morning Craig, what's the position? Thank you. Sorry guys if you were experiencing some signal issues. We seem to be back up and running, and I have heard reports of a nice big ellie bull just to the north of our position, so we're going to head across to there, but we do apologize for some signal breakups. So I was, just as I was driving along there, I was in contact with Craig, who called in Karula. Now unfortunately she's on Buffelshoek, but she is slowly mobile sort of southeast, so she might be coming to our direction later this afternoon. But for the moment she is beyond our boundaries, but great to hear that Karula is out and about and up north in Buffelshoek. While I am making my way towards this ellie, Jenna from Oregon, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Jenna asks what it was that made me decide to become a safari guide and what some of my favorite animals are. Jenna, it's quite a long story. I really wanted to either do this or be a wildlife vet. Unfortunately, I'm hugely allergic to animals, which in life makes that kind of work a little bit difficult, especially in working in various vet practices with close contact with lots of different species. So that's, I couldn't be a wildlife vet, but I was, when I was little, my family always loved traveling through the bush, and my grandfather in particular inspired that sort of love of the outdoors in me. He used to work as a game warden amongst many other things during his life, and I spent a great deal of time. I have very fond memories of sitting in his study, sort of working my way through his various animal textbooks and sketches. And I've always had that deep, deep fascination with nature and the outdoors. And then when I was about 8 years old, my little brother had just been born, and we went to a place called the Rhino Camp in Lapalala. And they took me out on walks. I was allowed to walk around that area, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. So from a very early age, I've always felt, it's hard to explain, but it's always like I felt the most myself when I'm in the bush, the most natural, the most at ease. I find that I do tend to get, especially now that I live out in the bush permanently, I do tend to feel fairly uncomfortable in cities now. I struggle to adapt back to that style of living. But that is the answer to that question. In terms of my favorite animals, almost impossible for me to answer that. I do love spotted hyenas because they are so interesting and they've got such a fascinating dynamic. But I do also really, really love rhino. I always have. They are the animal that I feel truly inspired me during my time in the rhino camp. And after that, when I was little, I used to research on all of the different species of rhino. I learned everything I could about them, and they still remain to me one of my favorite animals to watch and to see. And I've also been fortunate enough in the past to spend quite a lot of time with we are chatting about my particular background. Carol would like to know where I'm from. Carol, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. It's great to have you on the back with us. I am originally from Johannesburg. I was born and grew up there. I was schooled there. And I spent most of my childhood, I've lived in the same house. My parents have been in the same house in Johannesburg my entire life. Then when I was 19, I worked a little bit in the Kalahari, which was also something that truly cemented in me the idea that this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then I moved to the UK for 3 years, which is why my accent maybe is not as South African as it could be. I've still got a little bit of a sort of, I don't know, a bit of an English lilt to the accent that I have. But that is why I lived there for 3 years, and I got tired of being teased about my South African use of something like, for example, off, get off, as opposed to get off. So I started to adapt a little bit the way that I spoke, and somehow it stuck around even after I moved back here about 3 years ago. Treehouse dam now. I want to see if there's any nice birds around, and I have a feeling that if it does rain again, if it does rain heavily in the next season, this dam wall is going to need some serious TLC. It's starting to feel a little bit like there's danger at every turn and every bump as we go across it. It's actually quite a lot of water here still, but absolutely no activity. Action. Amanda from Alabama, USA would like to know if I've ever been to visit the USA. And the answer to that is no, I haven't. My parents have been. The last time they went, I believe I was writing school exams, so unfortunately I couldn't go with them. So it is definitely on my wish list. I have a very strong burning desire to road trip through America. I haven't quite decided where I would like to go, but I would be hugely keen to do that. And obviously in the course of my work with various tourists coming through to South Africa, I have met lots and lots of Americans, and I love hearing stories and how vastly different the various parts of America can be. So something that's definitely on my wish list. With our exchange rate, our current South African exchange rate, however, if I do go, I'm probably going to have to be very careful about what I spend my money on. Since we are busy discussing a little bit about my background, and since the bush seems to be fairly devoid of most life forms, Jim would like to know a little bit about my educational background. I have a bit of an interesting one in that respect. I was schooled in South Africa, obviously. I completed my schooling there. I then went to a sixth form college to do an extra year of school, and I did my A-levels there. And the reason behind that was I had an offer of private sponsorship to go to a university overseas, and it was a little bit easier to do so with A-level qualifications because I was quite keen on going to an English university. So I did my A-levels, and then I went off to the Kalahari, and during that time I'd applied for a degree from Cambridge, and I went across, did the interview and got in, but I still have no idea how, because I believe I spent most of my time arguing with the interviewer, but somehow that worked in my favor. So I did a 3-year law degree, and I was very, very fortunate to have had that opportunity. There are not many South Africans who are lucky enough to get that kind of sponsorship, and I still remain very grateful. What I did discover during that time, though, is that law was not really for me. I was not very good at it at all, especially in the beginning. I did get better, especially as I was able to start specializing in subjects that I found a little bit more interesting. So I discovered that if I could specialize a little bit in international law and start to sort of edge around that and environmental law, that helped me, and I got a lot better at it. But definitely, I was definitely not born to practice law. I never qualified to practice after I completed the degree, and I came straight back to do my training to come and work in the bush. And I spent 6 months doing some training, and then another 6 months working as an unpaid intern, and then I continued my work as a research guide at a volunteer organization. So that's just a little bit about my background. My law degree flirtation was one I'm very grateful for, but not something I will be planning on continuing. We've just got some zebras off to our left. Unfortunately, they are moving off, but it's nice to see some life out here. You can hear the drongos following behind them. And I'm fairly certain they are on their way to Treehouse Dam for a drink. Off they go. And I've only seen 2 of them, but I'm not sure if there aren't more hiding around in there. You can hear the drongo chirping as it follows behind them, just to catch all of the bugs that they stir up. So Diggy on Twitter has noticed, as we saw those zebra disappearing, that zebras have black spots on the inside of their legs, sort of up towards their elbows, or what we think of as their elbows. And those are just rough, calloused areas. That's quite similar to something that you get in horses. Now, we're not sure of the exact purpose behind them, but I think it's to do with the fact that when they lie down, it just stops the hooves from rubbing on the inside of the leg. Now, as far as I know, there's no scent glands or anything attached to those. It is just rough patches of skin. But I will have a look and do some more reading up on that, because a lot of people have been pointing those out to me recently. So I am curious to know a little bit more about them. So guys, our zebras have disappeared, and as I said, Wendy needs some gentle driving, so we're not going to be following up on them. But I do still want to make my way to where Brent saw those elephant tracks and just see what's happening up on Impala Road. And Impala Road is a good place to be. There's been a lot of action there over the last few weeks. We had Shadow and Sindile wandering around with the wild dogs crossing through there yesterday morning. So let's see what's happening on that side of things. As we continue the Q&A on Jamie and what my opinions are, Dylan from Iowa would like to know what my favorite interactions have been so far. I've only been working here about a month. And Dylan, that is a very, very difficult question to answer. I think that my wild dog sighting yesterday has been one of my favorite, just because it's my first time seeing them in this area, and we did manage to at least record some of that action to put on the highlights reel for you guys. I love every moment of the spotted hyena interaction. I love dealing with it when they come and chew on the tires. But I think if I had to describe my favorite interaction, it's not actually an animal one, which is unusual for me. I would say that working with such an interesting and dynamic group of people as we do at WildEarth has probably been my favorite, and being able to learn and talk to and pick the brains of such experienced guides as the other presenters that we have here has probably been my highlight in terms of interactions. And then of course the interactions with the wonderful viewers. It's going to run away. I'm just absolutely astounded and blown away. Sorry, Jandre just disappeared off there. It's a little data. I am absolutely amazed by how much some of the regular viewers know about this area and about the various animals around here. I think it's absolutely mind-blowing and very, very cool. And one of the things that I love so much about this concept of a live safari drive. So there you go, a bit of an answer as to my favorite interactions over the last few days. And it's hard to believe that I've been here a month already. It has flown past, and time does strange things out here in the bush. I did actually work a 6-week cycle before I started working here. I came straight from one job into another. So I'm sitting on about 10 weeks, yet not feeling it at all, just because it has been such an exciting time driving around here. So I've got an interesting interactive activity from Lisa. Now Lisa would like for me to show her the difference between buffalo and elephant dung, and I will do that as soon as I spot some of either. I'm just going to stop here and see if the steering wheel keeps coming. I think he is going to. So guys, we've got some very, very strange sounds coming from Wendy, and I think we're going to have to hop off and see what's going on, in keeping with the general nature of the last few days. So guys, while we just seeing this little steenbok come to us, which is such a lovely view, unfortunately we're going to need to temporarily say goodbye to you guys and just have a look at what is making that very, very odd noise. So please don't go away. We have some exciting stuff planned for you. We do just need to hop off and see what is happening.
Out there live has its technical challenges. We're experiencing some of that now and are working on it as fast as possible to get it sorted and get you back in the vehicle with us.
So guys, welcome back, and apologies for our technical difficulties. There was a fan on Wendy that was definitely making a very strange noise, but Genre has jumped off and hopefully fixed the problem for now, so we should be good for the rest of the sunrise safari. And I'm still making my way across to where Brent saw those large male elephant tracks, and apparently he is very heavily in must, so I'm keen to get to him and just see what he's up to. And for us, we were sitting around at camp last night after the close of the sunset safari, and we heard lots of squealing from the elephants, and we think that maybe that bull was just pushing them a little bit. He's in must, so he might be trying to look for mating opportunities and just generally throwing his weight around. But while we are on the subject of ellies, I have not forgotten Lisa's question, which was to compare the various types of dung between elephants and buffalo. So I've picked up, thanks to Genre, I've picked up some nice elephant dung. But before I show you that, I want to just find some nice buffalo dung so that we've got both in front of us. And if you are joining us for the first time, you will get to know that all of the presenters have a sort of shared fascination for the dung and feces of the various animals. It seems to be a sort of common trait within guides. And apart from the interest's sake and learning a little bit about them, it's also because you can tell so much about the various animals' actions and their animals' behavior from their dung or their scat, especially in terms of tracking if it's nice and fresh. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten about my baby elephant poo project, which is quite a mouthful actually, but a great project title in my opinion. So my idea is to, because we picked up a really tiny piece of dung and we were playing guess the age of the elephant, my idea is to keep watching elephant herds, and when I see a baby poop, then I want to go back and collect the dung so that I can always know from the size of the dung roughly what age that elephant is. So just a tiny project, and one that's, for me, just holds a little bit of interest. And you can never learn too much out here, and you never ever stop learning, which is my favorite aspect of the job. The fact that there is stuff that we don't know and that we still are finding out is the part that intrigues me the most. So let's find some nice buffalo dung. I know that there is some on this road. It's amazing how you start to get to know where to find various animals' dung pieces. To be able to show you these birds, but I think we're going to struggle. They are very small and they tend not to stay in one place. There's one just down there feeding. If we can maybe try and get them. Here we go. Thank you, Genre. I know that these are tricky little birds to see, but these are the white-crested helmet shrikes, and I'm sure many of you have seen them before, but they are one to add to your bird list if you are starting to collect them. They are known as white-crested helmet shrikes. Unfortunately, most of them have disappeared off, but a fascinating little group of birds, and there they go off. You always see them foraging together like this in a group, and they are what's known as cooperative breeders. So the offspring from the first generation, from the parents, will stick around and help their parents with raising the next year's offspring. So a cool little survival strategy. They have ducked away, so unfortunately we are going to struggle to see them, but great job, Jean-Ray, for at least showing us the birds that I'm talking about. They have disappeared off, and we have a buffalo poo mission along with an elephant finding mission, so we shall continue on our way. It's okay, wait. It's okay. It's gonna be okay. So still on the subject of cool birds, Blair from British Columbia, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. And Blair was watching yesterday when there was a big herd of buffalo and there were oxpeckers sitting on the back picking off the ticks. And they are very, very helpful in that regard, in helping the buffalo and various other antelope species keep clean and free of the tick problem that they might have. And Blair would like to know if oxpeckers ever get ticks, and if so, who helps them out with that? And the answer to that is they might well do. They will also get various mites, as most birds have on their feathers. And they will be if they do get ticks, it will be the very, very small kind. They're known as pepper ticks, and they are my personal hate because they seem to love me and attach themselves to me on a very regular basis. And given the nature of my skin, I do have a serious number of freckles, and the pepper ticks are tiny, tiny, tiny little dots, and they're very, very hard to see. So I often get confused between pepper ticks and freckles, sort of around my sock line. So they can be quite invasive, but for oxpeckers, yes, they would have ticks. They would acquire ticks, and they'll either sort of comb their beaks through to help rid themselves of those parasites, or they'll do what other birds do, which is to you'll find, especially you see it in hornbills, but it's not impossible that oxpeckers do it as well, which is to go and actually disturb an ant's nest and get the ants to crawl all over them. And the ants help to just keep them clean and neat, and they also secrete an acid, I think it's formic acid, that also helps to kill off the pests and parasites that are often on birds' feathers. So very good question. Unfortunately, the oxpeckers don't have oxpeckers to do the job for them, but they can do it themselves, and they can also rely on ants to help them out. And you'll also see them dust bathing, which helps as well. I don't understand how the minute you start to look for something like buffalo dung, you immediately can't find any. There's some in the road, but it is very squashed, so I'm going to try and find a better sample selection. While I am here, and we've got this magical tree in front of us, I would really like to tell you a little bit about this tree. And I believe that this is a tree that James was climbing a couple of days ago when Scott and Nikki went on leave. And it's this amazing tree in front of us. It's known as a balanites or a torchwood or a greenthorn. It's got lots and lots of different names. And this is a particularly big one. It's one of the biggest I've seen on this reserve. And they are incredibly fascinating. Their roots have got a very, what's the word? The opposite of acidic is... Basic. They've got very basic root system, and they almost make like a soapy paste if you can get into the roots. And you'll find that porcupines like to nibble on them, but they also help very much with indigestion for the various animals. So they go and they nibble on at the base of the roots, and it kind of acts like a laxative for them. So a useful tree, one that is also beautiful, that fluted, described in the tree books as a heavily fluted trunk of the mature trees, and that just describes the various folds within it. You can also use the roots to catch fish, as far as I know. If you have a sort of isolated pool of water and you're in a survival situation, you can cut away the gills of the fish. But a very, very useful tree, and one that is definitely one of my favorites. And we are right on the corner of Balanites Road, so that explains a little bit about where the various road names come from. And that's also one of my favorite things about exploring a new reserve and getting to know the history, is so many of these roads have a bit of a historical basis to why they are called what they are called. So I'm still in the process of finding out. Twin Dams is a really easy one because there's 2 dams there. But there's lots of different names, and especially in Arethusa, I would love to know the history behind it, some of those names. They are really, really interesting. So I'm going to keep asking about the history of the roads and see if I can find some people who've been living here for a long time and see if they can tell me a little bit about them. For example, Zoe's Road. I'd love to know who Zoe was, and who Rebecca is. And on the reserve I used to work at, there was a very popular road known as Hlalagahle Road, which is a traditional sort of Zulu farewell when you are on your way, when you are leaving somebody. So if somebody is leaving, then you say to them Hlalagahle, and if they are staying, you say Salagahle, which means stay well. So it's go well and stay well. And on this particular road on that reserve I was working on was a wonderful memorial, because there was actually a very sad plane crash that killed a couple of people who worked on the reserve. And it was, to me, one of the most beautiful, sort of understated ways of acknowledging them, just by saying, go well. Come on, Ellie, where are you? Piggies! Ooh, they're tucked away. We do have some warthog over there. Sure. I'm going to struggle to get them. They are moving off into the block. Unfortunately, given Wendy's current slightly tender state, we've got to leave those warthogs for now. He's a little bit thick and very tucked away. Just going to redirect myself because Chandre's pointed out some nice buffalo dung. So let me try and would that be okay, Chandre?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. So it has been driven over slightly, but I am going to hop out of the vehicle and show you a little bit about dung types. So Lisa, this is for you. Detach myself before I break the earpiece in the same style that James managed to. Okay, so I've got my elephant dung in hand, and we've got our buffalo dung here. Now, let me move my shadow out of it. So the buffalo dung, you can see, looks very much, if any of you have seen domestic cow dung, it looks very, very similar. It's basically a pat, and it's very loose and very wet and very easy to break apart. And this is not fresh. We've still got some what look like little maggots crawling around in it. Some termites. Oh, yummy. Let's see if we can grab some of these guys too. So when we see hornbills digging through various pieces of dung, this is what they're after. So I'm just going to bring these a little bit closer so we can have a look at them properly. I can explain a little bit. So with ellies, before I do that, ellies have these nice solid round balls, and in winter they tend to maintain this shape. In summer, when there's lots of dung beetles, then elephant dung will actually be flattened and they don't keep this ball shape. But they definitely don't make the same pat that buffalo do. Shift this over here. We'll start with the buffalo dung, and we do have, I'm not sure how well you can see them, but we do have some little grubs in there, and when we see hornbills digging through buffalo dung, that is what they're after. Little maggots moving through, and there's also some, you'll also find termites, although I don't see any in here. But while we're looking at it, just have a look at how finely digested this is. Don't worry, I will wash my hands at some point, but I haven't died yet, so we should be good. It's very, very finely digested. It's very fine contents. And that's because of the digestive system of the buffalo. So they have that four-stomach system of all ruminants. They bring it up and chew it again. They chew the cud and then pass it back through. So a very, very efficient way of digesting, and it minimizes the amount that they have to eat. Okay, we're done here with the buffalo. I'm going to pop that down and those grubs can go back to eating their food. Then if we compare elephant dung, so this is a fairly old piece, it's not all that fresh, but you can see that nice big solid shape. And if we break it apart, you can see now mostly in here there's grass, but there's also a bit of leaf content. But you can see there's a couple of leaves in here. You can see how very, very coarse this dung is. And that's because of the way that the elephants have a completely different digestive system, and it's actually one that's fairly inefficient. So they are hindgut fermenters, which means most of the breaking down of the cellulose plant material happens due to bacteria in their intestines that just help to break it down. And it's a very, very gassy process, and one that is much less efficient than the ruminant system. So although they can eat a lot more and process it fairly fast, in the end, one elephant, if it eats about 300 kilograms of food during the day in 24 hours, it's going to excrete about half of that as dung. So just a very interesting approach, and that's why we love playing in dung so much, is because it teaches us a lot about the various animals. And with elephants, you can actually tell so much from their dung, because especially towards the end of their lives, they start to wear down their final set of teeth, and you get more and more big chunks of undigested material in their dung. So you can even, the dung can even tell you what age an elephant is. So very, very cool. Thinking if there's anything else in here. Mostly just grass. The termites have also started to chew through here, and that's very common. You usually find more termite activity in the sort of the hindgut fermenters or the bulk feeders, just because there's more woody material and plant material left in there. So, a little bit of lesson about the various dung species, or the various species dung. Very, very interesting. We're done here. I'm going to return that to the ground as well. And since I am here and I am looking at it, I'm going to grab one more, just in keeping with the theme of dung and scat. This is very, very old, but you'll notice that I'm less keen to get my hands involved in this. Oh man, come here. So, some very, very old lion scat. And I'm saying lion just because of the amount of hair that is in this scat, and you'll often find lots of hair and chips of bone in lion scat, whereas with hyenas their digestive system is so incredibly impressive that they've actually dissolved almost everything, and their scat is much less coarse and is much smoother. But not something I want to play with my bare hands. They carry all sorts of disgusting things, and they're vectors for lots of different diseases, so I'm not going to play around with it. And just judging by the size as well, it is old leopard scat. So I'll pop that back where it belongs, along with my sticks. Oh well, I'm always grubby. I think I've now got a fantastic combination of dung and the engine oil from yesterday's mechanics adventures decorating my fingers. I think a good session with a scrubbing brush might be in order at some point. Okay, so let's go and look for at least one of the animals we've been talking about. We are on the road where Brent saw the tracks. I haven't picked up on them yet, but I'm going to see what I can find. A lovely aroma of a combination of buffalo and elephant dung. Sorry guys, I'm just listening to the radio. And I'm just going to re-clip myself in, or I'm going to be fiddling with my earpiece the whole time. There we go. So while I was pulling that elephant dung apart, I was very strongly reminded of a friend of mine who was busy making a promotional video for her private guiding business, and we were busy doing a guided walk pretending to be guests, and naturally, as you can imagine, we had a lot of laughs. And one moment was when she tried to, sorry Gendre, I'm going to hope it stays still. One of the most beautiful little birds that we get out here. I'll try and have a look at it. Oh dear. Little one, stay still. It's just there, you can see it. Brilliant, thank you, Gendre. Beautiful little bee-eater. Also known as the springbuck bird, because it is the same colors as our South African rugby team. But the smallest of the bee-eaters that we get here, hence the name little bee-eaters, and one of the only ones that we're seeing at the moment. Quite a few of them have migrated. They will be back shortly. So the European bee-eater, I haven't seen many white-fronted bee-eaters, but their arrival should be fairly soon. But thank you, little bee-eater, for being slightly unusual in that it's actually sitting still for us to be able to look at it. Very pretty little bird. So we still have some elephants to find. Thank you, Gendre, for managing to capture that beautiful little bird. Hopefully one that some of you might be able to add to your bird list in the future. But let us carry on. I know I was in the middle of a story about doing promotional videos for a friend of mine, and she really wanted to find some fresh elephant dung to demonstrate as part of this short video and describe to people. And of course all we could find was elephant dung that was several weeks old, and she was busy talking away doing this video with this nice solid piece of elephant dung, and she said, and if I break this apart, you could just see her struggle. She could not get it broken open. It was too old and too hard. And when she eventually did, about half of it sprayed into her face down the front of her shirt, and we were all sitting there with a camera trying so hard not to laugh, and we just couldn't do it. We were finished. We had to giggle, and we had to start the whole series again. So we picked up that elephant dung and I pointed out some of the termite activity, and Anna Marie would like to know if there were any live termites in there. I didn't actually see any in that particular elephant dung, but I have definitely seen lots of live termites in dung before, so it's entirely possible. This is starting to look a bit more positive. I'm definitely seeing tracks here. And the big branch in the road is also quite a giveaway. So I'm sure that these are the same elephants that we were hearing last night that were around our camp. We are heading in the right direction. Little branch in the road. So we've done a lot of fiddling about in some dung, and Marianne says thank you for that. Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Marianne, I hope it does help you win the next Who Dung It competition. If I see some interesting dung that might be different for you all, I will definitely show it to you, and let's see how on top of your various dung, the dung species you are. We'll see if I can catch you out. I haven't seen anything yet that's too out of the ordinary, but I am keeping my eyes peeled. Sorry guys, I'm just going to chat to Brent on the radio. I was, but somebody else says I was going to, but they're busy talking again, but Brent was calling me. I'm just going to have to wait my turn to continue this conversation. One moment. There's a lot of conversation happening. Brent for Jamie. Copy that, thanks. I've just come off Zoe's Road onto Wurtila Access, so I'll check on Aubrey's. Copy, thanks. So guys, Brent and James are out and about tracking a female leopard, and as luck would have it, very, very close to where we are now. So he's asked me to just check up on one of the roads. So now I need to concentrate for the briefest moment to try and remember exactly which road it is. Yes, okay. I do know where I am. We're still on the tracks of those ellies. I'm not sure where they've gone. See if we can find them here. got some great info from the various viewers. Patty and Ellen, thank you for letting me know about the names of the roads, Zoe's and Rebecca's. Apparently they are the landowner's daughters, which would make absolute sense. Thank you for that info. It's so cool that you guys can tell me about stuff like this. Got some Duggar boys in here. If I shift forward slightly, that we go. And they are tucked away and lying down. And those are the sort of boys that ambush you when you are walking through the bush, especially when they're lying down like that. If you're not very, very alert to what's going on around you, you can see how thick it is in there. And you definitely don't want to surprise these boys. They tend to be very, very grumpy. I have climbed a tree before to escape from a buffalo bull. So definitely one of the animals you want to closely look out for when you're walking through the bush. And these males in particular, the breeding herds are generally fine. You can approach them quite happily, and they tend to not, if they are approaching you, it's more in a curious way. But these old boys, these Duggar boys, or the mud boys, they tend to be a little bit more unpleasant to encounter on foot. Definitely not one of my favorite things to meet, and I have had to dance up a tree. And it's amazing how you can learn to ignore thorns when you have to, and you don't even notice them until after the buffalo's gone and you have to detach yourself from said tree. But it's amazing what adrenaline can do to keep you climbing. So let us carry on with our mission, see if Brent and James have got anything on their side. So they are tracking a female leopard. I'd love to know who that could be. Very, very interesting. I just need to think for a moment. I'm trying to picture the map in my head. Sandy Patch Road, then Aubrey's, then Gallagher shortcut. That's right. Okay, so we are heading in the right direction. I'm surprised we haven't seen those elephants yet. Their tracks were very fresh. They cut into this block to my left. Standing by. Copy that, thanks Brent. Yeah, I might start heading in that direction as well. Sorry guys, just chatting to Brent. He was giving me a shout. Apparently they've heard wild dog. They heard the audio of them calling, and a bit closer to where we are now, up towards the Buffelshoek cut line. So I think it might be worth just speeding up a little bit and getting there, just to see if they're still in that area. So for those of you who might have missed it, we did have 3 of them yesterday, 3 young males moving through this area. And it could be that they've decided to stick around. So I'm going to loop up this way and check from this side. I'm not going to take Sandy Patch Road because the signal does tend to disappear around the top of that road. So we'll take this road instead. See if we can get a brief visual of those. Wild dogs are so cool, but they are so tricky because they move very fast. So we don't want them to cross across our cut line. It is right on our boundary. Taking a chance here. I'm sure you guys are all really keen to see wild dog. I know that I am again. Yesterday was the first time I've seen them on the Sabi Sands. So yesterday, for my first wild dog sighting, not only was it my first one here, but it was also some of the best wild dog viewing I've ever seen in my life in South Africa. It was really cool. Brent and I were both there following them kind of on either side, and they immediately started hunting, and they spotted a steenbok, chased it. We tried to stay with them, but we lost them briefly, and within the space of maybe 30 seconds they'd killed the steenbok just out of our vision. And by the time we got there, they had consumed almost everything in maybe less than 5 minutes. It was awesome to see. They were still kind of chewing on the last remnants of it, but most of that carcass was just obliterated really, really fast. And wild dogs are awesome like that. They'll kill something, they'll eat it as fast as possible, and that's obviously a good strategy to prevent competition and to prevent that carcass being stolen from them. So they'll eat lots and lots and lots and then head off and start hunting again. They're very cool animals. So just to give you an idea of what's happening on the Game Drive channel as well, the guys who were with Karula were actually the first ones to pick up the audio of the wild dogs, and it seems like they crossed each other's paths very briefly, but the main wild dog pack is running up further north into Buffelshoek. And we're just going to get up to the top of this junction and then stop and listen to what's happening. And quite broad question, and it ties in very nicely to the wild dogs that we're making our way towards to try and see if we get lucky in seeing. And now the wild dogs are very, very closely monitored. A lot of the packs are collared, and Jason would like to know sort of what the process is behind the research. So how does it get decided what's important and what isn't? And it's a huge question, and one that is very, very broad. Sorry, I just saw an interesting track. Okay, I think it's a bit of a false alarm. Thought it was a drag mark. So, Jason, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. That's a great question. A lot of the research will depend on the conservation status of the animals. So for wild dog, because they are so critically endangered, it is worth researching into them and getting an idea of their comings and goings so that we can be better informed as to how to protect them and how to increase their numbers. So a lot of it will be to do with the endangered species, and then beyond that, deciding what is important and what isn't is a very difficult topic. And obviously ecologists are always looking for new and different topics to research into, just to increase our overall understanding of how this whole system works, and therefore the best way to go about protecting it. And that goes for anything from grass ecology to trees, anything along those lines. Once I get to this cutliner, I'm just going to stop and listen. So guys, welcome back, and a big apology for that. We just went into a bit of a tricky signal area. So just in case you're wondering what we're up to, I'm currently watching what looks like Brent and James speeding away in the opposite direction, and I'm going to try and keep track of them. They're also making their way to where the audio of the wild dog was. So let's try looping around this way, just to over the last few weeks. So we've got the 5 Birmingham males starting to push down into Matimba's territory, and that puts huge pressure on the Nkuhuma and the Styx prides. And unfortunately, in this particular situation, although only a couple of days previously the Matimba males had chased the Birmingham boys out of their territory, or at least further north away from the Styx pride, unfortunately in this case the Nkuhuma pride were not so lucky. They were probably caught without the protection of the Matimba males. Hello Buffalo Thorn, thank you Ellies for that. So minor roadblock, nothing Wendy can't handle, even in her slightly weakened condition. So the Birmingham boys, although they were chased away by the Matimba males, the Matimba males were obviously too far south to get to the Nkuhuma pride. The Birmingham boys smelt that buffalo kill, or heard the buffalo kill, and decided to hone in on that. And somewhere in the course of that conflict over the kill, here's my early tracks coming north along this road. Somewhere in the course of that conflict, one of the lionesses was killed. We don't know how or why. She might have, I put forward a theory that she might have been protecting one of the sub-adults. It could also be that she was just desperately trying to save that carcass from being lost to the Birmingham boys, and she got killed in the process. So definitely an unfortunate situation, but one that does naturally occur. And we can expect to see over the next few months, we can expect to see a lot more conflict and possibly more deaths. Junior is going to have to make himself very scarce very soon. And he must make sure that he stays out of the Birmingham boys' reach, because they will go, in particular because he is competition in terms of being a male lion. They will go out of their way to make his life difficult. So it seems as though these Ellies have somehow evaded me. There's tracks here crossing into Arathusa, but it looks north of our boundary. We'll keep an eye open. Yeah, a lot of them have crossed across this road, left into Arathusa. I'm just trying to work out exactly where I am, but I think it's not Arathusa. They've crossed into Simambili. So outside of our area, unfortunately, looks as though the whole herd has gone across. We might get lucky with a straggling bull that is just following behind the herd, but I don't think so. I think we will have to save elephants for the sunset safari this afternoon. But I know, just while we've been talking about the Birmingham males and the Nkuhuma lioness, I know that a lot of you are very, very upset by her death, and as we all are. And we will be definitely keeping you updated. This bull's actually crossed back in here. Ellie's crossed back in here. So we still might have some hope for elephants. We will keep you updated as to what's happening. Most of the action is happening on Torchwood at the moment, which is to the east of our boundary. But we will be keeping a close ear on the radio. I heard reports that the Nkuhumas tried to push back north, away from Nkoro, towards that buffalo kill. But we haven't been, none of the guides have been able to locate them this morning, or the Birmingham boys, as far as I can tell. So it's one of those, it is one of those things where, although we get to follow the magic storylines and the births and the successes and the successful kills of some of the lions, like that amazing buffalo kill that Brent got to see, it also means that with it comes some more difficult moments to watch. I'm just going to dodge this incoming car. And loop back around towards this block. And the Ellies were here. I can see their tracks all over the show. But unfortunately, I think that they have ducked away beyond our borders. It has been quite a quiet sunrise safari, but definitely not one that I would consider to be unsuccessful. We did manage to get a far better idea as to where those hyenas are denning, which is exactly where we expected them to be. So really, really cool. We got to spend some moments with those cubs. I got to have to chase them away again. And we've also got some fantastic prospects for this afternoon sunset safari. We've got wild dogs running around to the north, as well as Karula, who will presumably be out to escape from those wild dogs. So really, really exciting days ahead. We do have the continuation of that very, very sad story regarding the Nkuhuma lioness and her very, very sad death. So guys, from a somewhat sickening Wendy, who did very, very well. I'm very proud of Wendy. She's done fantastically. Thank you to Jean-Ray for his 3 hours worth of work, and to Tara and Lou in FC as always. And we will see you guys later for the sunset safari.